at the top, and the park is cut out in the bottom, and there's a stream that runs through it called Rattlesnake Creek. I mean, come on, you can't make that up. In New York City, Rattlesnake Creek. It's a great park to go for a hike in. It's not very big, I don't know, 40, 50 acres, something like that. It probably says in my book how many acres it has. But it's one of these places, when you go in it, it's magic. And when you go out, there's interesting delis nearby. I mean, what I found, part of what was so much fun, was going to these far-flung neighborhoods. You have to eat, right? So you go around and you find the strangest, ethnic neighborhoods with food that you don't get here in Manhattan. So it was fun to go sort of foraging like that. I enjoyed it. Yes, this gentleman had.
Hi there.
Hi.
Some years ago I heard that by the end of the occupation, whenever that was, 82, 83, 1700s, the British occupation, I mean.
I couldn't tell what you were talking about there.
That Manhattan was entirely denuded of its natural forest. Is that what you've heard as well?
Pretty much. They chopped it down for firewood.
Yeah, they were kind of stuck here. The revolutionaries had kept them contained on the island, so they would chop everything up and tear
also
a lot of homes down. Oops, sorry.
Also fortifications. They needed to, build these bulwarks everywhere.
More recently, I heard that it was believed there might be some virgin stands of forest left on Manhattan somewhere. Do you know whether either in Manhattan or elsewhere in the boroughs there are any known virgin stands of wild, either wetlands or forest lands? Just curious.
Adrian said that he thought there were here and there some trees that had survived in a number of parks. I didn't, I couldn't tell the difference, frankly, but I did try to seek out whatever naturalist help I could get in the various parks. And the wetland parks, you're not going to have big stands of forest. It's mostly seagrasses and scrubby stuff like that. But really, Inwood Park and Van Cortlandt Park, and even in Staten Island, in the Greenbelt in Staten Island, you do find some really enormous trees that they say are Revolutionary War era species. But I can't give you a better clear. I could lie to you and say, yeah, sure, but you got to find them. Yes, over here.
I'm very interested in the stoplight that you said was in the middle of the Bronx River, as well as the balloons that were in the Howitz. Thank you. And I was thinking, if you weren't commissioned by the city, would you have photographed that stoplight in the middle of the Bronx River? Because I think there's something interesting about that side of nature that's sort of in New York very prevalent. I think. I mean, it's everywhere. And I was wondering if you would have taken that picture had you not had to be a legacy. It's a veneration, I would say, of the wilderness. So, do you think you might have taken that picture, or did you take that picture?
Yeah, I took that picture.
Yeah.
I have it in my bag, so I'll show it to you. Yeah. It's not something that you would see easily. You literally had to be in a canoe on the river to see it, because it wasn't where it should have been, like near the bridge that it was pushed off of. I mean, I don't know, it managed to go downstream somewhat, because the river, even though it was 8 inches or, a foot deep in the spring, the river's a torrent, and it gets to be 6, 8, 10 feet deep on days. Because I could see along the embankments, there were things caught in the trees that could only get there if the river was up that high. So somehow that stoplight got pushed downstream someplace, and it was just an oddity to see it there. The balloons in the Hallett just came floating down. It's the hand of man in nature, that kind of photography, right? It just, some party on a rooftop somewhere in Manhattan, those balloons floated off, and they made their way to that place. And so it was an odd, sort of bittersweet combination. But in terms of the legacy idea of the project and your question, this really is a legacy of the assets that we all own, in a sense, as citizens. And they're unknown and unnoticed to many people. Most people don't know parks beyond Central Park or the ones in their immediate surroundings. Nobody goes, to some far-off borough to go take a hike. And what I hoped to do with this work was to kind of share the richness of our environment, because we tend to think that we live in a city and nature is out there. We actually live in nature. We just paved over this little part of it. So I think that nature hasn't encroached on the city. The city has covered up a lot of nature, but it's still a force, and it's there. And when we go into it, we have an experience that really is an incredible reward for living in the city. And it was that I wanted to say we should enjoy in some way, Yes, that.
There was one picture with a lighthouse. Oh, one picture with a lighthouse out to the left.
Yeah.
Where was it?
That is the Little Red Lighthouse underneath the George Washington Bridge, which you could bike to. If you started at Battery Park, you could literally bike right up to that lighthouse nonstop, which is an incredible thing. They've made the Hudson River, Riverside Park, Battery Park, one continuous pathway along the river. You know what's interesting? Adrian Benepy, the commissioner, his father, Barry, who did the markets, also was the guy who stopped Westway when they were trying to develop Westway years ago. So this family, this Benepy family, has some connection to making New York a more habitable place. And I believe that, contrary to what George Bush did for his father in Iraq, Adrian Benepy continued his father's legacy about making the river available to New Yorkers all the way. So it's a kind of nice twist of time. Yes, this person.
I was just wondering if any influence with the photos that were taken in the 1930s, how they contrasted with yours, and if they did influence your work at all.
No, they didn't. They were more workmanlike pictures of the assets of the parks. They were in black and white. But I do have an influence, and that is another body of survey work made in the 1870s, part of our westward expansion. There were numerous surveys. There was the Powell Survey, the King 40th Parallel Survey, the, who was the other survey? Just have to recall in a minute. Anyway, they had young photographers on them. O'Sullivan and Jackson and Hilliers and numerous other photographers, people who had photographed the Civil War when they were kids. Like, O'Sullivan and Jackson were, I think, 19 and 21, and they photographed the Civil War. When that was over, they went out west with their mule trains and glass plates, and they photographed the West to discover our mineral resources and our water resources and our land resources and the pathway for the railroad. And they opened the West up, and it was their documentation of this that produced the National Geological Survey in America, and ultimately it brought Congress to set aside hundreds of millions of acres of land in the national park system and other government-managed lands. So their work has always been an inspiration to me, because it was at a time of incredible difficulty. Photography was only 20 years old. These were like young guys with video cameras. They were running around the West photographing and making these incredible records that have given us both the history